Az elmúlt időszakban milliónyi bevándorló érkezett Európába. A magyar határon felépített kerítés azonban ma már megállítja őket. Soros György szerint ezt a kerítést le kell bontani, és további milliókat kell betelepíteni Afrikából és a Közel-Keletről. Ez veszélyes, ezért a Soros tervet meg kell akadályozni. Stop Soros! Készült Magyarország kormánya megbízásából.
George Soros. Dlouhodobý terč útoků v Maďarsku nebo v Rusku. Nyní ale i na Slovensku nebo v Česku. Dnes vlivný biznismen se narodil v roce 1930 v budapeštské židovské rodině. Do Británie ale nakonec prchl až před komunismem. V roce 1969 převzal vedení investičního fondu Quantum, který o 10 let později vykázal 40násobné zhodnocení vložených prostředků. V roce 1979 začal dávat peníze i do nadace Open Society Foundation. Ta má už 40 poboček různého typu. V minulosti podporovala dizidenty, včetně českých chartistů. Peníze jdou mimo jiné na pomoc uprchlíkům, v Česku třeba na stipendia pro romské studenty. Přispívá se i na zdravotnické projekty nebo iniciativy k řešení násilí na ženách. Koncem 70. let začal George Soros poskytovat stipendia černošským studentům na univerzitě v Kapském městě. Velký den investora George Sorose přišel během černé středy v září roku 1992. Při spekulaci na pokles libry vydělal za jediný měsíc $1 miliardu a způsobil nucené vystoupení Británie z evropského měnového systému. Podobné kroky opakoval i v dalších letech, kdy zaútočil na měny Thajska a Malajsie. Její tehdejší premiér Sorose obvinil, že podlomil tamní hospodářství. Cena měny klesla v roce 1997 v důsledku zahraničních ekonomických tlaků v poměru k dolaru o 30%. A tohle je Soros pro Česko. Jednou prý dosadil Andreje Babiše do pozice premiéra, jindy zase platí demonstrace proti němu. Soros platí neziskové organizace, třeba Člověka v tísni. Ve skutečnosti se na rozpočtu organizace přesahujícím 1,5 miliardy korun podílel Open Society Fund necelým 1 milionem korun.
What we see in Hungary for the past couple of years increasingly is that so-called NGOs, so the organizations established or financed by Mr. Soros and the like people, Mr. Soros is being, if like, one symbolic person among them, are going for political decision making, influencing political decision making, engaging in trying to change policy making, public policies, but also explicitly going for political goals if it's about social issues, or recently, that's the peak of the iceberg, as we say, it's illegal migration. And also keep in mind that George Soros himself made himself a political actor in Hungarian domestic politics, because he explicitly stated a couple of years ago that he wanted to become, and he and his organizations wanted to become, the political opposition of this government.
He strongly financed the opposition at the end of, around the fall of communism. So without him, the currently governing party, Fidesz, maybe wouldn't have been so successful in promoting their ideas. So without his financial support. So his influence is dating back from those times, and well, it was, I wouldn't say loud and clear, but after he established his university in Budapest, after he's coming here regularly, well, it was quite obvious that he has some interest here. Well, what we are having now is a completely new phase, of course, after the government decided to put him into its target. Well, he had to react something. I was actually really wondering why was he so late with an outspoken answer. But finally he gave an answer, and of course he articulated that he opposes the current political trends in Hungary.
On the other hand, thinking about your answers, it seems to me that one 90-year-old man is more powerful than the government of the sovereign state.
Yeah, but we are not talking about one 90-year-old man here. We talk about an international organizational structure which is heavily financed by Mr. Soros. Just recently, last year, he has transferred 18 billion US dollars from his hedge funds and personal fortunes to Open Society foundations.
The Hungarian government has a very dominant influence and imbalance in the media, and is able to basically brainwash many citizens into thinking that there are some sort of sinister external enemies and internal enemies in Hungary. But in fact, from the point of view of a civil society organization, I'd say that's a bunch of lies mostly. And sadly, there is not enough space to discuss.
They have many other interesting ideas. For instance, that we had this report about the state of the Hungarian economy. It's a regular report made by the European Commission, made by the Commission every March, every year. And within the campaign, the government just described this whole report as part of the external threat, and this was like interfering and meddling into the Hungarian campaign and election campaign. So every criticism or any kind of negative opinion that is coming from the West or the European Union, they're just trying to depict it as part of the Soros campaign somehow, and part of a broader conspiracy theory.
The idea of open society would like at least to water down national identity, but I would say rather that open society, the whole idea is against national identity and national sovereignty, as it would like to create some kind of multicultural world village. As Mr. Soros calls it in one of his books, the universe or association of open society, as some kind of global entity which would control and govern the world instead of national governments.
We believe Mr. Soros and his organizations are posing a danger not only for Hungary, they are posing a danger for democracy in general, and certainly for Europe if it's about illegal migration or migration-related issues. Mr. Soros, for the past couple of decades, have very conscientiously and in a sophisticated way have built up a framework, a network, in which institutions, persons, groups of people are going for one particular goal, which increasingly is becoming political, and we face a major problem here. They are doing that without any kind of democratic mandate.
We're talking about the spokesperson who's been like a student of the university that was like labeling as part of the Soros army, or the structure of the army that belongs to Soros on one hand, and also Fidesz got a lot of support before.
If a former leader of Mr. Soros's hedge fund is stating that, let alone in Hungary, at least 2,000 people are working to achieve the goals, the financial and political goals of a billionaire, that's something you should be worried about.
It was said by one of his former colleagues or subordinates, let's say, from Switzerland. Government-friendly newspaper just leaked it a few weeks ago. We don't know whether this number is correct. No one double-checked it, no one fact-checked it. This is a statement which is of course fruitful in the narrative, in the communication flow which the government articulates these weeks in the heat of the campaign.
A brüsszeli bürokraták azt követelik, hogy Magyarország változtassa meg bevándorlás politikáját. Ez felháborító. Most egy Soros György pénzelte szervezet Brüsszel támogatva pereket indít hazánk ellen. Álljunk ki Magyarországért, mert csak nekünk van jogunk eldönteni, hogy kit engedünk be hazánkba. Mondja el véleményét, töltse ki a nemzeti konzultációs ívet. Állítsuk meg Brüsszelt. Készült Magyarország kormánya megbízásából.
Most likely this is nearly not enough in a campaign like this because Hungarian voters are more concerned about healthcare, the state of healthcare and education, and state corruption, at least according to the recent polls. And I'm sure you've heard about this by-election a couple of weeks ago at Rodné. It was also very telling that this historic defeat of the Hungarian of Fidesz government it shed light on how, at the same time, not so effective to push this anti-Soros, anti-migration, conspiracy theory, stylish campaign, because the opposition could simply mobilize formerly inactive voters in as much as it was 350%, and they could defeat this nominee in a district that was historically a Fidesz base and headquarter.
These attacks basically said civil society's role does not include holding government accountable and talking about human rights and democracy. If you do that, we'll consider you not part of civil society, but some sort of, and it was said, agent, a foreign agent, an agent of foreign interests, as if, that idea of protecting democracy, democratic values, rule of law would be alien to Hungarian society.
These NGOs are trying to describe themselves as some kind of independent, objective civil actors who are completely neutral, and according to their own self-description, they are trying to communicate based on this neutral role. And of course, the fact and the problem is that they are not neutral. They are clearly promoting a political agenda, and they are clearly playing a role of a political actor.
In Hungary, we've been seeing a very worrying, alarming trend of what is often called rule of law backsliding. So over the past 8 years, we've seen how state institutions have become weakened. The rule of law has been, in many aspects, much weakened. Human rights protection, something that we're very concerned with, of course, because we're a human rights organization here, has been weakened. Xenophobic tendencies are alarmingly rising in Hungary. Racist speech, racist attitudes are on the rise. Anybody who mentions this is going to be attacked by the government. And so we see how instead of a discussion, a debate about pluralism and the values that are important in a democratic country, we see how that debate is completely changed into as if it was us versus them. It's not about us as society together and our common values and the debates that we should be having, but it's rather an us versus them ideology that is very much pushed on us.
When they are blamed or just mentioned as a political actor, they feel themselves very, very hurt. And they describe this type of communication as dangerous, although that's the truth. So there would be no problem, I think, if these organizations related to the institutionalized network of open society, or just promoting the idea of open society, if these organizations would say that, okay guys, we are as well political actors as elected political leaders or political parties in the parliament.
Looking at massive campaign against Mr. Soros, why haven't you used the same amount of money, I mean 100 million euro, to improve your education, your hospitals?
Because we have used a lot more. You always need money in modern political campaigning and modern political communications, because you cannot do it without money. We have invested a lot more. We have invested hundreds of billions of Hungarian forints, and that would be billions of euros for educational and healthcare purposes. So you come to this country at the peak of political campaign. Don't make the mistake that you accept the claims and the version of the truth on behalf of the political opposition, especially a political opposition that's been denying all steps, all achievements we've done for the past 8 years.
Well, I'm asking you because I can see these billboards everywhere around the Budapest saying that Soros is
yes, but the responsibility of a government and or rather a political community is when it's running a campaign is to keep the focus on the real issues. That's what we've been doing for the past 8 years.
So Soros is the real issue, and the level of education, the level of hospitals to promote, for example, that people should study is not the real issue.
Yeah, that's also the real issue. But if you know the nature of political communications, you know that if you like, line 1 of political communication is followed by line 2 and line 3. Most crews who are coming to my country are making the problem or the mistake that they take a look only at the first line. We talk about education and healthcare on a daily basis.
But we can't see on the street. What we can see on the streets are
because we talk to the people directly. We engage those who work in the healthcare system. We talk to those who work in the educational system. We talk to all communities in our campaign.
I'm sure you are familiar with the nature of political campaigning. In a political campaign, you cannot use very detailed and deep argumentation for different kind of problems. And that's why I mentioned that Mr. Soros is much more a brand or much more a metaphor for this whole open society problem.
The idea that organizations of individuals forming associations, using their right to freedom of association, have the right to talk about public affairs, have the right to ask government, are you spending public funds well? Are you upholding the rights that you subscribe to in domestic law or in the European Union's values? These questions, the government is increasingly saying here, should not be asked.
How was the Soros case created? I mean, what kind of media and communication formats and strategy has been used?
Like I just mentioned, it's like really the air we breathe in Hungary. I mean, if you listen to the public radio or you're watching the television, the public-funded television, or walking around the street, you could see the billboards, and there has been, national consultations before. So the government, I think it was approximately 150 million forint a year that has been spent for this centrally distributed content strategy. So they were really making great efforts. And I mean, with regards to the pro-governmental or the government-organized media, that is basically the dominant media in terms of like numbers. I mean, in the last couple of years, the Hungarian government just took over at least 80% of the Hungarian media market. And it's crucially important with regards to the countryside, where the papers, the print magazines are centralized and the content is centralized.
Most of this money were sent to companies owned by 3 people who are quite close to the government. Isn't this a problem?
No, this money is being spent on the media.
Yeah, but on the media and agencies which are owned by people who are close to the government.
Yes, but how does it relate to reaching out to the people? I mean, the ownership of the media is a reality. In your country, as we know, it's also a reality. So we spend money on the media which is reaching the people.
So you don't find it as a problem?
No, it's not. In modern political communications, you need to spend money on political communication purposes. That's the name of the game.
And should you spend this money to companies which are owned by people who are close to
government? We spend this
government?
money on the most effective, efficient way. We have shown example how we can stop what is happening. But if we don't keep up those measures, if we don't talk about these issues and we don't call attention to these facts at the level of the European Union, we are going to fail. Therefore, it's the main topic for this election. It's the main topic we have to keep in mind if we make decisions or take steps basically in any part of our lives.
Saying that the migration is the biggest threat or the problem for Hungary, on the other hand, why didn't you speak about this problem in the moment when you silently accepted 1,300 migrants?
I don't know. What do you mean by this question? We haven't accepted any migrants.
Well, you accepted 1,300.
No, we haven't. We have provided shelter for political asylum seekers, as is required by international law. It shouldn't be mixed up in any way with migration, which is coming on us.
This is semantics, nothing else. And it dates back to when this whole campaign started, that the distinction between migrants and refugees were totally merging. There was no difference between migrants and asylum seekers. Prime Minister said that these people who we accepted were politely knocking on our doors. So, of course, the Hungarian state does what it is obliged to do and examine the rights, whether they should have asylum or not. So, yeah, this is true, but the cause of it, why it was so surprising, is because there was no difference whatsoever among migrants, terrorists, asylum seekers, Syrians, Afghans, Middle Eastern, Northern African. It was all in one box, in one cap in the government communication.
NGOs in any society, of course, also are looking for support domestically. In Hungary, I think this is extremely difficult. There is no public funding going for democracy work, for human rights protection whatsoever. The Hungarian government clearly disfavors this kind of NGO activity, and though there are no public funds available for this, or if there are, they would come with strings that are very strong, very strict in terms of limiting an organization's ability to speak freely about the difficult human rights issues that do exist in Hungary.
We are very worried, as a matter of fact, that Mr. Soros's organizations and people are basically embedded into the European institutions.
The public enemy number one right now is, as I mentioned, the European Union and Soros together. So it's not like there is a Soros plan and we have some problems with the European Union. They're trying to put the two together and describing it like we had a lot of issues with the European Commission before, and it's really important that we're always using the Commission on the billboards. It was never the European Union, it was always Brussels. It's easier to fight with an institution that is like, not, I would say it's not the strongest within the European institutions, than, you know, attacking Paris and Angela Merkel directly every day. So it's easier to put Brussels on the billboards. And it's also important that if you have a look at the recent polls, the European Union and Brussels is considered to be a bigger threat than anything else, like Russia.
So it's not only propaganda, it's not only government messaging that is picked up by the government-controlled media, but also we've seen legislative measures, something that has not happened yet, I think, in the European Union itself, but it's very much modeled on what is happening in Russia with the Russian foreign agent law that targets civil society organizations in Russia. And so last summer, in 2017, June, the Hungarian parliament adopted legislation which focuses on foreign-funded NGOs and requires these NGOs, which receive foreign funding, which funds would include money coming directly from the European Commission. These NGOs are required to list and label themselves as foreign-funded, as if in an EU member state, foreign funding would be harmful, suspicious, unwanted, when the Hungarian government, of course, also receives a lot of EU funds for the benefit of Hungarian society.